Hi everyone. I hope you're comfortable, maybe lying in bed, or sitting somewhere quiet, with the faint sound of night around you. Tonight, we're going somewhere far away, to a place where time itself feels older than memory. We're going to a village that once stood beneath the shadow of the great pyramids of Egypt. You've heard of the pharaohs, the kings of gold and divine power, but almost never about the people who lived in their shadow. The ones who carved the stones, who baked the bread, who whispered prayers into the desert wind. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it, where you are? I wonder if it's night already, or maybe dawn. Because in ancient Egypt, dawn was the most sacred hour of all, the moment when the sun, rose from the underworld and lit the golden sands again. Maybe, just like now, the people of that distant world would open their eyes to the soft glow of the morning, hearing the first calls of the ibis and the donkeys braying in the distance. Now, let's imagine it. The year is around 1850 before our era. The pyramid that rises above the horizon is not new, its limestone face already worn by years of wind. But beneath it, where the desert meets the green edge of the Nile, lies a small cluster of homes built from sun-dried mud brick. Their walls are the color of baked bread, their roofs flat, and on those roofs, pots of grain dry under the sky. This is where our story begins, in the village of the workers, the craftsmen, the families who live in the shadow of kings. And among them lives a young man named Keperu. His name means the one who becomes, a name given with hope, that he might rise, like the scarab beetle rolling the sun across the heavens. When the morning comes, Keperu is already awake. The light seeps through the cracks in his wall, painting lines across the straw mats on the floor. He hears the murmur of his mother grinding barley in the corner, the slow rhythmic scrape of stone on stone. Outside, the air smells of wet clay, because the builders near the pyramid site have been mixing mud for bricks since before dawn. And in the distance, someone sings a low tune, a song older than writing, passed down by voices now long gone. Life here is simple, but never still. Before the sun grows too strong, men gather with their tools, chisels, hammers, and baskets. They walk toward the rising light, their shadows long behind them, toward the great mound of stone that touches the sky. Each day, they climb the scaffolds, move heavy blocks, and chip away at the limestone, guided by overseers and scribes who mark every measurement with delicate precision. It is a world built on repetition, breath after breath, strike after strike, and yet within that rhythm, there is something deeply human. A quiet pride, maybe, or just the comfort of knowing that even the smallest hand can help build eternity. Keperu doesn't carve stone, not yet. He's an apprentice craftsman, still learning from his father, who works shaping copper tools for the masons. Their workshop is warm and dim, with the scent of metal and oil. The copper glows red under the flame as they hammer it flat, turning it into chisels sharp enough to cut stone. His father's hands are rough, his eyes lined from years of staring into the fire. He doesn't talk much, but sometimes he hums softly, as if keeping time with the pulse of the forge. In the evenings, when the air cools and the wind drifts from the river, Keperu walks to the edge of the fields. He likes to stand where the green fades into the desert, the place where two worlds meet. There, the sand hums with heat even after sunset, and the stars begin to appear one by one, like sparks from Ra's chariot. He thinks of the pyramid rising above him, how enormous it seems, like a mountain made by human hands. To him, it feels alive. He imagines that inside its deep corridors, something ancient is breathing. The old priest of the village, a man named Panifer, says that the pyramids are not tombs at all. He says they are the ladders of the gods, stairways for the king's soul to climb into the heavens. Keperu once asked him, "But what if the gods don't want him there?" The priest only smiled, his teeth pale against the red glow of the fire. "Then the gods will send him back," he whispered, "and we'll see him again in the flood." You see, in this world, death isn't the end. It's more like the other side of the river, invisible, but always near. Every day, people leave small offerings outside their homes, a bit of beer, a crumb of bread, a flower from the reeds, for the spirits who wander at night. Sometimes, when the wind blows from the west, it carries voices with it. Or maybe it's just the sound of the dunes shifting. No one really knows. Tonight, Keperu sits with his family on the roof. The air is cool, and the moon is bright enough to see the outlines of the great stones far away. His mother tells a story, one she learned from her grandmother, about how the stars are the eyes of those who built the first pyramids, watching forever over their descendants. Keperu listens, half dreaming, while a beetle crawls near his hand. He doesn't brush it away. It glints like a tiny piece of obsidian under the moonlight, rolling a grain of sand that shines like gold. Somewhere in the distance, a jackal cries, soft, echoing, lonely. And for a moment, it feels like time has stopped, as if the desert itself is holding its breath. Beneath the same sky, thousands of years ago, this world existed, alive with warmth, noise, and faith. A place where eternity was built one brick at a time. And as we drift further into that world, deeper into the lives of those forgotten workers, their voices begin to return, carried on the desert wind. The village wakes before the sun. A faint shimmer of blue still clings to the horizon, and for a moment the desert is perfectly still, quiet enough that you can hear the breath of the river in the distance. Then, slowly, sound begins to return. A rooster calls somewhere near the edge of the fields. Dogs bark. And from the narrow lanes between the mud brick houses, the voices of men rise, sleepy, low but steady. The day has begun. Keperu steps out of his home carrying a woven basket, his skin already dusted with a fine sand that seems to live in the air itself. His mother hands him a small clay jug of beer, thick, sweet, and warm, their morning drink before the work begins. He nods his thanks, then walks out into the growing light. The smell of baking bread drifts through the streets, mixed with the earthy scent of smoke from the fires. Somewhere nearby, a woman sings as she grinds barley, her voice blending with the steady rhythm of the millstones. By the time the first light of RA spills over the horizon, the workers have already gathered. They meet near the base of the Great Pyramid, that impossible shape, half shadow, half fire, glowing gold where the sun catches its side. It looms above them, so vast that from where they stand, its peak seems to pierce the morning sky. The men bow their heads for a brief moment as a priest passes among them, scattering drops of water from a palm branch. It's meant to cleanse them, to keep their hearts light as they begin their labor. A voice calls out, deep, commanding, and the workers begin to move. Teams of men pick up ropes, baskets, and chisels. Others take long wooden poles to balance the stone sleds. Each team has its own overseer, who keeps count of every block, every tool, every worker. And above them all stands the chief overseer, his linen robe spotless, his head shaved smooth, a small wooden staff in his hand. Keperu's father joins the metal workers, carrying bundles of tools wrapped in cloth. He pauses, glances back at his son, and gives a short nod, a silent signal that it's time to keep up. The rhythm of the day begins not with shouting, but with song. One man starts to hum, low and rough, and the others follow. It's an old work song, older than the pyramids themselves. The melody is simple, one line repeated, changing slightly with every breath. The sound grows stronger as the sun climbs higher, and soon it fills the whole plain, the sound of hundreds of men singing in time with their labor. Lift and pull, and lift again. The chant rolls like waves. Bare feet press into the dust. Sweat darkens the linen wraps around their waists. The ropes creak, the stones grind against the wooden sleds, and still they sing. Each note is a heartbeat in the great body of the pyramid. Keperu watches the masons at work, their precision, the strange beauty in their movement. One strikes, Another measures. Another brushes away the dust. Every mark on the stone has meaning. Each face must fit perfectly against the next, like pieces in a cosmic puzzle. They say the design was given by the gods themselves, through dreams and visions. And the chief architect, the one who holds the blueprints written on papyrus, is treated almost like a priest. He rarely speaks, but when he does, everyone listens. Near midday, the heat becomes unbearable. The air ripples, and the light seems to hum. The workers rest in the narrow shade of the scaffolding. They eat dried dates and onions, drink more of the thick beer, and rub oil onto their arms to keep the sun from burning their skin. Keperu sits beside a scribe named Nefer, a quiet man with careful eyes. Nefer's hands are always stained with ink, and he carries a wooden palette with two small bowls, one for black pigment, one for red. You count everything, Keperu says, watching him mark a row of numbers. Why? Do the gods care how many stones we lift? Nefer smiles faintly, not looking up. It's not the gods who ask for numbers, he replies. It's men. Men forget, you see. The gods remember everything, but men, we forget. He writes another line, the reed pen scratching softly. Besides, he adds, a name written is a life remembered. A task written is a life measured. Without the writing, all of this, he gestures toward the enormous slope of the pyramid, would be nothing but dust again. Keperu doesn't know what to say to that. He looks at the endless desert stretching beyond the site. The heat has turned the air into a silver haze. And in that shimmer, the pyramid seems to float, half real, half dream. When the rest break ends, the men return to work. This time, Keperu helps his father sharpen tools on a block of sandstone. The rhythmic scrape fills the air, steady and patient. His father's voice finally breaks the silence. You listen too much, he says. Keperu blinks. What do you mean? You watch, you ask questions. That's good, but dangerous. Stones don't like questions. They listen too. He says it with such seriousness that Keperu isn't sure if it's a warning or a joke. But he remembers it anyway. The day drags on. Dust coats everything, skin, hair, lips, until even the workers seem carved from the same stone they're moving. But as the shadows grow longer, something changes. The light turns softer, redder. The heat eases. And for a brief moment, there's silence. The kind of silence that only comes after a full day of effort, when even the air seems to rest. From the top of the scaffolding, the view stretches for miles. The Nile glitters like a ribbon of bronze, winding through the green fields. Beyond it lies the desert, endless, empty, and somehow eternal. The men stand quietly, looking out over it, each one lost in thought. Some think of home, of wives and children waiting. Some think of food. And some, perhaps the younger ones like Keperu, think of what all this might mean. To build something that will outlast them all. To carve their labor into eternity. As the last of the light fades, the overseer dismisses the workers. They descend the scaffold slowly, limping, laughing, brushing the dust from their skin. Their voices soften again, back to the ordinary tones of evening. Someone begins to whistle a tune, the same one they sang that morning, now quieter, slower, almost like a lullaby. Keperu and his father walk home in silence. The path is long, winding between low walls and palm groves. The air smells of smoke and water reeds. When morning comes again, the village is wrapped in a thin veil of mist rising from the river. It moves through the narrow streets like smoke from 1,000 hidden fires, curling against the mud brick walls and drifting upward toward the flat rooftops. The air is cooler than usual, and for a short while, even the desert feels gentle. The first sound is the low murmur of the women grinding grain. The second is the laughter of children chasing one another barefoot through the dust. their voices echoing softly between the walls. Keperu opens his eyes to the smell of baking bread. It's everywhere, warm, yeasty, heavy with the scent of barley and earth. His mother is already at the fire pit, shaping small loaves with her hands, pressing them flat, then laying them on the hot clay. A faint hiss rises as dough meets the heat. The bread will be sold later to the workers at the pyramid, or traded for fish, or oil, or beer. Everything here is exchange. Nothing is wasted, not even the ash, which they mix into plaster, or scatter to keep away insects. "Fetch some water," his mother says softly, not looking up. Keperu takes a small jar and walks toward the well at the edge of the village. The sun is still low, but already the light is golden, painting long lines across the sand. He passes by neighbors preparing for the day, a potter turning his wheel, a young girl plaiting reeds into baskets, a man sharpening a sickle for the harvest to come. Each person moves with a rhythm, as if the whole village breathes in time with the rising sun. At the well, women stand in a circle, gossiping quietly as they pull up the heavy rope. They speak of the scribe's new apprentice, of a calf born last night, of how the floodwaters might be late this year. Their voices are low but full of life. The well creaks. The jars fill. And with every movement, the bracelets on their wrists clink like tiny bells. As Keperu turns to leave, one of the women, old with eyes sharp as a falcon's, calls out to him. "Your father works too hard," she says. "He should let the young do the lifting." Keperu smiles, but doesn't answer. In this village, everyone knows everything. And yet, secrets still find places to hide, in the folds of linen, in the cracks of the walls, in the silence between words. Back home, his mother has finished baking. The loaves are piled high in a basket, still steaming. Keperu tears one open. The crust is crisp, the inside soft and sweet. The taste of barley, smoke, and life itself. His mother watches him, half smiling, half tired. Her hair is streaked with ash and flour, her hands cracked from the grindstone. But her eyes are calm, the kind of calm that only comes from repetition, from doing the same thing every day and knowing it matters. Later in the morning, Keperu walks to the potter's yard. His sister, Mary, works there. She sits on the ground beside a wide, low wheel that spins with the steady rhythm of her foot. Clay stains her hands, her arms, even her face, but she doesn't seem to notice. She shapes the wet earth into jars, bowls, and small idols, the kind people keep in their homes to protect them from sickness or misfortune. The air smells of wet clay and smoke from the kilns. Cracked pots and shards lie everywhere underfoot, fragments of failed attempts, each one a quiet reminder that even in a world obsessed with perfection, mistakes are part of the pattern. "Do you ever get tired of the same shape?" Keperu asks, crouching beside her. She shrugs. "The same shape," she says, "but never the same clay. Each handful comes from a different place. The river changes every year, and so does the earth." She runs her finger along the rim of the pot, smoothing it perfectly. "Besides," she adds softly, "if it breaks, we make another." In the distance, the call of an overseer echoes, a sign that work has begun again at the pyramid. The deep, rhythmic chant of the laborers drifts through the hot air, mingling with the hum of the village. Even when unseen, the pyramid is always present, its shadow stretching across everything, even the hearts of those who never touch its stone. By midday, the heat presses down like a weight. The sky turns white, and the air seems to vibrate. Children hide in doorways, dogs lie panting in the shade, and the smell of hot dust fills the lungs. Keperu helps his mother carry water jars to the bread ovens. The potter's kilns glow orange. Sparks leap into the air like fireflies. Somewhere nearby, a priest chants a short prayer for protection from scorpions. The sound blends with the whir of the potter's wheel and the thud of kneading dough, a strange, beautiful harmony of daily life. As the afternoon deepens, Keperu finds a moment to rest. He sits beside the well again, watching the dragonflies hover over the water. The world feels heavy and quiet, as if the gods themselves are sleeping in the heat. But even in stillness, there's movement, a slow pulse, a rhythm that never stops. He can feel it under his feet, in the heartbeat of the earth. Somewhere far below, the river still flows, hidden beneath the sand. When the sun finally begins to sink, the colors of the world change. The sky burns gold, then deep red, then violet. The village comes alive again, women laughing as they gather laundry from the roofs, men returning from the pyramid with dust-caked faces, children running to greet them. Keperu's father arrives, his steps slow but steady. His hands are raw, his arms streaked with sweat and grit. But when he sees the fresh bread waiting on the table, he smiles, the same small, tired smile as always. As they eat together, the air fills with the scent of oil and herbs. They share stories of the day, small things, simple things. Who fell from the scaffold and lived. Who found a scarab crawling across his tools. Who swears he saw a light move at night between the stones of the pyramid. The laughter that follows is soft, careful. Because even as they laugh, each of them knows that some stories are not only stories. After the meal, Keperu climbs to the roof. The night wind smells of bread, smoke, and clay, the scent of his world. He looks toward the horizon, where the pyramid glows faintly in the moonlight. Night in Egypt never truly sleeps. Even when the fires fade and the village falls silent, the desert remains awake, murmuring softly in the darkness, like a giant creature breathing beneath the earth. The air cools, but it never grows cold. And in that quiet warmth, the wind begins to move, slow whispering, carrying grains of sand that slide over the rooftops, through narrow alleys, across faces and footprints. Keperu lies on his mat, listening. He hears the distant croak of frogs from the river, the soft clinking of pottery in someone's courtyard, and something else, a faint hum deep and steady, like the heartbeat of stone. He's heard it before, but only at night, when the moon is full and the wind blows from the west. His mother says it's just the air moving through the cracks in the pyramid. But the old priest, Panifer, says it's the voices of those who were buried alive within its walls, speaking to the gods through stone. Keperu doesn't know which to believe. But he knows this. When he closes his eyes, he can almost see the shapes of the corridors, long slanted halls where the air never stirs, where the light of torches bends and dies. He dreams of them sometimes, endless stairways that lead downward instead of up, doors that open to rooms with no walls, only the sound of sand shifting endlessly below. The next morning, he wakes before dawn and walks out to the edge of the village. The desert stretches before him, silver in the half-light. He feels drawn toward it, though he doesn't know why. Each step sinks into the cool sand, soft and weightless. In the distance, the pyramid glows faintly under the rising sun, and the shadow it casts reaches far, almost to where he stands. Near the base of the pyramid, a small group of workers digs into the earth, searching for limestone chips to reuse. Their tools clatter faintly. The sound echoes strangely, as if the desert itself is hollow. One of the older men, with skin like sun-cracked leather, stops and listens. He frowns, then drives his pick into the ground again, harder this time. A hollow thud. Keperu steps closer. The man kneels and brushes away the sand, revealing a patch of smooth stone beneath. A flat slab, darker than the limestone around it. An old tomb, the man mutters. Too close to the surface. It's been forgotten. He spits into the dust, then covers it again quickly, as if afraid to look too long. The others follow his lead. No one wants to disturb what sleeps beneath. But Keperu can't stop thinking about it. That night, as he sits outside his home, he finds himself staring toward the pyramid again. It looks different in the dark, Not just a monument now, but something ancient and alive. The wind from the desert carries the scent of dust and myrrh, the smell of the tombs. And in that wind, he hears the faint sound again, the hum, the whisper beneath the sand. Panifer the priest sits nearby, warming his hands over a small fire. His robe is old, his skin thin as papyrus, but his eyes shine with a strange brightness. When Keperu approaches, the priest gestures for him to sit. "You heard it, didn't you?" Panifer says quietly. Keperu hesitates. "The sound." The priest nods. "It is not the wind. It is not the stones. It is the breath of the earth, the old ones, still speaking." He pokes the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the night. Before the pyramids, before even the kings of the first dynasties, there were others who built in this land. They dug deep chambers in the sand, lined with black stone that the desert does not eat. They left no names, no faces, only echoes. When the pharaohs came, they built upon those places, sealing the old voices beneath new walls. That's why the sand hums, boy. It remembers. Keperu feels a chill crawl down his arms despite the heat. "Do you believe they're still there?" he asks. Panifer smiles faintly, his teeth gleaming in the firelight. "They are always there. You can bury a body, not a soul." A moment of silence follows. The fire crackles softly. The stars seem impossibly close tonight, each one a tiny spark in the blackness above. Keperu imagines them as the souls of the dead, watching, countless, patient, unblinking. Then the priest begins to tell a story. It's one Keperu has never heard before. He says that once, long ago, a young builder like him was sent to dig near the base of an unfinished pyramid. He worked for days under the blazing sun, until one morning, the sand gave way beneath his feet. He fell into a hidden chamber, deep, cold, and filled with statues that glowed faintly in the dark. At the far end, he saw a doorway sealed with a black stone. And though it was closed, a voice spoke from the other side. It called his name, not the name his mother had given him, but the name his soul had before birth. The boy never returned to the village. But sometimes, when the wind was right, people said they could still hear him singing under the sand. A low, distant melody that rose with the night air. Keperu listens, transfixed. The fire flickers, casting long shadows on the priest's face. When the story ends, there is only silence again, the kind of silence that feels alive, as if waiting. Panifer looks at him for a long moment. "Do not fear the dead," he says softly. "Fear forgetting them. That is the true death." Later, as Keperu walks home through the sleeping village, he feels the ground shift slightly beneath his feet. The sand moves, whispering secrets he can almost understand. Somewhere, deep below, the earth hums again, steady, eternal. He looks once more toward the pyramid, its dark shape cutting into the starlit sky. For the first time, he wonders if it is not a tomb at all, but a gate. And as he lies awake, listening to the breath of the desert, he begins to sense that his life, like the river, like the stone, is part of something much larger, much older, and endlessly alive beneath the sand. The morning after Panifer's tale, the air feels different. The sky is pale and cloudless, but the light seems muted, as though the sun itself is reluctant to rise. Keperu walks through the narrow lanes of the village with his basket of tools, passing walls daubed with faded red paint and half-finished carvings. Everywhere, life hums softly, women grinding grain, donkeys braying, a child chasing a chicken through the dust. And yet, beneath it all, he hears it again, that low hum, faint, constant, like something deep within the earth calling to him. At the edge of the square, under the shade of a date palm, sits Nefer the scribe. He is older than Keperu, but not yet gray, his fingers always stained with black ink. A reed brush rests behind his ear, and before him lies a sheet of pale papyrus weighted with small stones to keep the wind from curling it. Lines of hieroglyphs dance across the surface. Birds, eyes, serpents, reeds, suns, each one alive with meaning. Keperu pauses. He has always watched Nefer from afar, but never dared to speak. The scribes live in a world apart, the world of signs and symbols, where words themselves are magic. The builders shape the stone, the scribes give it a soul. "Come closer," Nefer says without looking up. His voice is calm, almost musical. "You've been standing there long enough for the ink to dry." Keperu hesitates, then steps forward. "I didn't want to disturb you." "You can't disturb what listens," Nefer replies, smiling faintly. "Only what sleeps." He gestures for Keperu to sit beside him. The boy does, lowering himself onto the warm ground, feeling the coarse grains of sand between his fingers. For a while, Nefer continues to write. His hand moves swiftly, each mark deliberate and smooth. When he finishes, he places the reed down and leans back. "Tell me," he says quietly, "what do you hear when the desert is silent?" Keperu blinks. "The wind," he says. Nefer shakes his head. "No. The wind is only a messenger. What does it carry?" Keperu frowns, remembering the hum beneath the sand. He almost tells him, but something holds him back, a feeling that these words belong to the dark, not to the daylight. Nefer seems to understand anyway. "You've heard it, haven't you? The sound that comes from the ground when everything else is still." He leans closer, lowering his voice. "That is the oldest language of all. It is not written in ink or carved in stone. It is written in vibration, in the breath of the world." Keperu listens, his heart thudding softly. "The priests call it the voice of the gods," Nefer continues, "but it is older even than that. Every pyramid, every temple, every word we write, all of it is an attempt to echo that sound. To catch, for a moment, the rhythm that binds all things." He looks down at the papyrus. "Do you know why we write in pictures, Keperu? Because the world speaks in pictures. The falcon flies not because it chooses to, but because it was written to fly, long before the first sunrise." He picks up his brush and writes a single sign, a spiral. "This," he says, "is the path of life. The snake that eats its own tail. The river that curves but never stops. When you build, you make stone move. When I write, I make sound stand still. Both are ways of remembering." Keperu feels his chest tighten. He wants to ask more, about the hum, the buried chambers, the names Nefer whispered, but the words won't come. Instead, Nefer unrolls another piece of papyrus. It is older, the edges yellowed and frayed. On it are lines of symbols unlike the others, sharper, stranger, almost alive. They seem to shift slightly as Keperu stares, like insects crawling across the page. "These are not for the temple," Nefer says softly. "They are older than any temple. They were found beneath the sand, inside a stone chest sealed with pitch. The priests call them dangerous. They say they were carved before the gods had names." He runs his fingers lightly over the ink. "Look at this one." He points to a symbol shaped like an eye with 3 lines descending from it. It means that which sees beneath. The builders once marked it near the foundations of great tombs, not to warn, but to remind. Because to look below is to look backward in time. Keperu shivers. He remembers the hollow stone slab the workers found 2 days before. Could it be one of those ancient places, older than the pyramid itself? He dares to ask. If those who lived before us built beneath, what were they building for? Nefer gazes toward the horizon, where the sunlight gleams off the white limestone face of the Great Pyramid. "For the same reason we build above," he murmurs. to remember what was lost. He stands slowly, dusting the sand from his robe. Then, almost as an afterthought, he adds, "You build for the living, Keperu. But everything we build is for the dead." The words linger long after Nefer has gone. Keperu remains seated, tracing the marks left in the sand by the scribe's scroll. A breeze moves through the palm leaves above, whispering faintly. For the first time, he feels that the wind itself might be reading something, carrying unseen words across the desert. Later that evening, as the sun sets behind the dunes, he sees Nefer again at a distance, standing near the base of the pyramid. He holds a small oil lamp in his hand and disappears into one of the lower tunnels where the workers store their tools. Keperu waits. The stars appear, one by one. The lamp never returns. That night, Keperu cannot sleep. The sound of the desert presses against his walls, a soft, endless whisper, like fingers brushing papyrus. He lies awake, watching the ceiling flicker with faint light from the dying oil lamp. Outside, the wind changes. The smell of the river fades, replaced by something dry and ancient, the scent of limestone and dust. He knows that smell. It belongs to the pyramid. He rises quietly, careful not to wake his mother. The moon hangs low and wide over the desert, spilling silver light over the roofs. The sand glows faintly, the same way skin glows when light shines through it. He walks barefoot, the cool grain shifting between his toes, until the dark shape of the pyramid fills the horizon. The night workers have gone. Only the wind remains. From somewhere near the base, a faint glimmer winks, a single drop of yellow light, deep inside the stone. Nefer's lamp. Keperu hesitates. The stories Panifer told swim through his mind, of voices beneath the ground, of names lost to time. But curiosity pulls harder than fear. He finds the narrow gap where blocks of limestone meet, a tunnel half hidden by fallen sand. He squeezes through, scraping his shoulder against the stone. Inside, the air is cold and smells of oil and age. The walls seem to breathe. He moves slowly, his fingers brushing hieroglyphs cut into the stone. They are faint, half erased, spirals, stars, the falcon's eye. Some he recognizes from Nefer's papyrus. Others he has never seen before. The torchlight ahead flickers once, then disappears. "Nefer," he whispers. Only silence answers. He steps forward again, the tunnel narrowing until he must crouch. His breath echoes softly. Then, a sound. A soft scrape, like someone dragging a reed along stone. He turns a corner and freezes. The tunnel opens into a small chamber, square and low. The walls gleam faintly with a thin sheen of salt crystals, reflecting the light of a small lamp set on the ground. Beside it, Nefer kneels before a block of black stone. He doesn't turn when Keperu enters. Instead, he speaks quietly, as if he expected him. "You shouldn't be here, builder." "I followed the light," Keperu says. Nefer sighs, running his hand along the surface of the block. The stone is smooth, unnaturally so, and cold even in the desert heat. It hums faintly under his touch. "This is not part of the pyramid," Nefer says. "It's older. Much older." He gestures to the walls. This chamber lies beneath the lowest foundation. The builders never marked it on their plans. It was already here when the first stone was set. Keperu steps closer. The block bears markings unlike any he has seen, not carved but raised, as though the stone itself had grown them. The shapes shimmer slightly in the lamplight. Curves, eyes, spirals that seem to twist inward the longer he stares. "They look alive," he whispers. Nefer nods. "Perhaps they are." He lifts the lamp and tilts it so the light falls across the symbols. "They say this is where the stars were called down," he murmurs. The priests believe the gods taught men to build from above. But what if it was the other way around? What if the builders were the ones who taught the heavens? The air seems to thicken. Keperu swallows hard. The faint hum he heard before, it's louder now, resonating through the stone beneath his feet. The flame of the lamp bends slightly toward the black block, as if drawn by breath. Nefer touches the surface again, and the vibration deepens, a low, trembling tone that feels inside the body rather than in the ears. "Listen," he says softly. "This is the true writing, the language of stone and sound. Every block in the pyramid hums like this, though most have forgotten how to sing. But this one remembers." Keperu kneels beside him. The vibration travels up his arms, into his chest. It's not frightening, only vast. He feels for a moment, as if the desert itself were awake beneath him, shifting, turning, breathing. Nefer sets the lamp down. "I came here once before," he says quietly. "Years ago. Panifer brought me. He said it was not a tomb, but a seed, planted by those who came before. A message to those who would come after." He looks at Keperu with strange intensity. "Maybe you were meant to find it too." The hum grows louder, steady, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. The air trembles. Fine sand drifts down from the ceiling in slow spirals. Then, silence. The sound vanishes as suddenly as it began. Only the faint hiss of the lamp remains. For a long time, neither speaks. Finally, Nefer exhales. It has gone quiet. It never stays awake for long. "What is it?" Keperu asks. Nefer shakes his head. "A memory, or a warning, or both." He places his hand flat against the stone, then withdraws it slowly, leaving a faint smear of ink from his fingers. The mark glows faintly before fading. "Do not tell anyone," he says. "Some truths are meant to sleep." Keperu nods, though every part of him burns with questions. As they crawl back through the tunnel toward the surface, he glances over his shoulder one last time. The lamp's light dances across the black stone, and for a moment, he thinks he sees the spiral symbols move again, pulsing softly, like eyes opening in the dark. When they emerge into the moonlight, the pyramid looms above them, silent and immense. The desert wind brushes against their faces, carrying the faintest echo of that same vibration, distant now, like a memory fading into sand. Nefer extinguishes the lamp. "The night forgets nothing," he says quietly. "But we do." He turns toward the village, his shadow stretching long across the dunes. Keperu lingers behind, staring at the place where they emerged. The sand is already shifting, covering the narrow entrance grain by grain. In moments, it will vanish again, as if it had never been there. But Keperu knows better. The pyramid sleeps, yes, but not in silence. And as he walks back toward the faint lights of the village, the wind seems to whisper a name he doesn't yet recognize, low, drawn out, ancient. Not Nefer's. Not his own. Something older. Something waiting. The night after their descent into the pyramid, Keperu cannot shake the feeling that the ground beneath the village is no longer still. When he walks, he feels faint tremors beneath the sand, like a slow, steady heartbeat hidden far below. Even the air feels heavier, filled with the taste of dust and something metallic, like the scent before a storm. He wakes before dawn and walks toward the river. The horizon is still dark, a thin blue glow edging the distant hills. The world is silent except for the faint lapping of water against reeds. Here, away from the hum of the pyramid, the world feels softer, gentler, yet just as alive. The Nile stretches before him like a strip of black glass. Its surface reflects the stars, trembling points of light that blur when the wind moves. He sits at the edge, knees pulled close, and listens. The river has its own voice, low, rhythmic, endless. It whispers against the banks, as if speaking to itself. When he was a child, his mother told him that the Nile carried not only water but memory. It remembers everything that has ever touched it, from the first tears of the gods to the sweat of the workers, to the blood spilled on its shores. It flows north, toward the sea, but in spirit, she said, it flows backward, into the past. The Nile does not move away from time, it gathers it. He dips his hand into the cool water. It feels alive, not just cold but aware. He closes his eyes. For a moment, the darkness behind his eyelids turns bright, like sunlight reflected from deep below. He sees shapes, faint, fluid, shifting, the outlines of faces, hands, and eyes formed by ripples. They vanish as quickly as they appear. Then faintly he hears it, the same vibration that came from the black stone beneath the pyramid. It moves through the water now, a low pulse that travels into his skin. The river hums, answering the earth. It's the same tone, the same living sound, the song of the ground, carried through water. He opens his eyes and finds that the surface of the river has changed. It moves in slow concentric rings, though there is no wind now, no fish. The stars reflected on the water shimmer as though caught in breath. And from somewhere behind him, a voice speaks. You hear it too. Keperu turns sharply. Panifer the priest stands in the pale light, leaning on a wooden staff. His robe flutters softly in the breeze. He looks older than before, as if the night itself has weighed upon him. Keperu nods slowly. It's the same sound, Panifer. The same hum from under the pyramid. Panifer approaches, kneeling beside him. The water remembers what the stone dreams, he says. One speaks, the other listens. That is how the world keeps balance. He dips his staff into the river, stirring it gently. You think the pyramids are tombs, he continues, but they are not. They are mirrors. They are built to reflect the sky, to echo what is above and below. The river and the pyramid are one. Both are ways of speaking to eternity. He studies Keperu for a moment. You've been inside, haven't you? Keperu hesitates. Panifer's gaze is steady, patient. Finally, Keperu nods. I followed Nefer. We found a chamber. A black stone that sang. The priest closes his eyes, whispering a prayer under his breath. The heart of the desert, he murmurs. It has woken again. When he opens his eyes, they glint with reflected starlight. Did you touch it? Yes. Panifer exhales slowly. Then you have felt what few still remember. That sound is the first word ever spoken. Before men built walls, before gods had names, there was that sound, and the silence that followed it. He looks toward the horizon, where the first faint hint of dawn begins to color the sky. The ancients built to preserve that sound. They believed that if it ever faded, the world itself would dissolve into dust. Keperu stares at the river. What does it mean? Panifer smiles faintly. It means that all things, stone, water, breath, are part of the same voice. You build pyramids not to trap the dead, but to remind the living to listen. They sit in silence as the sun breaks over the horizon. The water turns from black to gold, the reeds glowing like strands of fire. In that moment, Keperu feels something lift, a warmth spreading through his chest, the hum still faintly echoing beneath it. It's not a sound anymore, but a rhythm, the pulse of the world, matching his own heartbeat. Then Panifer speaks again, his voice low, almost reverent. There is a place, he says, far from here, where the river bends around a field of reeds. Beneath that bend lies another chamber, buried before the first kings. They say its walls are made of the same black stone, smooth, cold, alive. The river passes over it every day, singing to it. That is where the hum begins. Keperu looks up. You've been there. Panifer shakes his head. No one goes willingly. The priests guard its location. But some say that when the stars align and the Nile floods, the current carries whispers from that place, voices that speak in dreams. He leans closer. If the stone called to you once, it may call again. And when it does, follow it. But remember, not everything that speaks should be answered. The priest rises and begins to walk back toward the village. Keperu remains by the water, watching as the sunlight climbs higher, scattering gold across the ripples. The hum fades, replaced by the soft calls of herons and the distant sound of waking life. But he knows what he heard. The pyramid hums with stone. The river hums with memory. And somewhere beneath both, something ancient stirs, something that has waited longer than kings, longer than time itself. Keperu closes his eyes and listens again. Beneath the wind, beneath the rustle of reeds and the cry of birds, the world hums, steady, endless. Not loud, not frightening. Simply alive. He whispers to the river, not expecting an answer. Who are you? For a moment, the water ripples, not from the breeze, but from something deeper. And faintly, almost too soft to hear, a single word rises from below. Remember. At the edge of the desert, beyond the last line of huts where the sand began its endless ripple, there was an old sycamore tree. Its roots clung to a patch of damp earth, fed by an underground trickle of water, a rare and ancient vein that had given life to the village for generations. It was said that long before the first pyramid stones were laid, this tree had already been old. Its shade was sacred, its silence deep. And beneath it, on certain evenings, villagers gathered not to work, but to remember. It was under that tree that I met the old scribe again, the one who had shown me how to hold a reed pen. His hands trembled now, the skin like papyrus, dry and thin. But his eyes were sharp as the tip of a chisel. He said he had spent his whole life recording the words of others, kings, priests, overseers, but never his own. And tonight, he wanted to speak of something no record should hold, what it truly means to live beneath the shadow of a pyramid. He began slowly, as if afraid that the night itself might listen too closely. Do you think the pyramids were built only by slaves? He asked, with a faint smile. No, boy. They were built by hunger, by duty, by the weight of belief. He told me that many men who worked on the great stone slopes were not prisoners but farmers. When the Nile flooded their fields and work ceased, they came here, offering their backs to the king in exchange for food, beer, and shelter. Their huts lined the edges of the desert, thousands of them, filled with laughter, sweat, and quarrels. Each man carried a mark on his shoulder, not of chains but of the sun. And when the flood receded, they returned home with their pay, sometimes even proud. Yet beneath the pride, the scribe said, was a quiet unease. For every year, the pyramid grew higher, and the fields grew smaller, the taxes heavier. He spoke of the overseers, too, those who carried whips not from cruelty, but fear. Fear of failing their superiors, fear of the king's wrath, fear that one cracked block or misplaced angle could anger the gods themselves. We all served something, he said, his voice almost breaking. Some served gold, others the pharaoh. But most of us served time itself, trying to leave behind something that would outlast us. A wind stirred the branches above us, carrying the scent of desert salt. The scribe looked up and sighed. When I was young, he whispered, I used to think the pyramids touched the sky, that they were the homes of gods. But now I know they are graves. Beautiful ones, yes, but graves nonetheless. The living built them for the dead. I asked him if he regretted being part of it all, recording the commands, the names, the endless lists of stones and workers. He smiled faintly. Regret? No. It was our world. We didn't question it because we couldn't imagine another. That is the secret of our time. Obedience was not forced, it was believed. The night deepened, and one by one, torches around the village dimmed. Only the stars remained, scattered like shards of crushed quartz across the black sky. The scribe's words stayed with me, echoing softly. Belief built the pyramid more than any hand. When I left him beneath the sycamore, I turned back once. The old man sat still, eyes lifted toward the distant moonlit slope of the Great Pyramid. And for a moment, it looked as though the tree itself bowed toward it, like a weary servant paying his final respect. That night, as I lay on the roof of my home, I thought about his words, about how faith can build mountains, and how silence can bury the truth beneath stone. Somewhere deep inside me, I began to understand that Egypt's greatness was not in its kings, but in its people, the nameless, sunburned hands that shaped eternity one block at a time. And yet, even that eternity felt fragile, because in the whispers of the night wind, I could swear I heard the desert speaking, reminding us that all stone, no matter how mighty, will one day turn back to sand. The next morning, I rose before the sun. The air was cool and still, the sky a pale gray veil waiting to be brushed with gold. From my roof, I could see the faint outline of the Great Pyramid, massive, silent, eternal. Smoke already rose from the workers' camp at its base, thin trails curling upward like prayers. I decided that day to go there, to see for myself the people who built the king's resting place. The walk took nearly an hour. The closer I came, the more the world changed. The soft hum of the village gave way to the rhythm of hammers, the grind of stone against stone, the groan of wooden sledges dragged through the sand. There were thousands of workers, men, women, even children, each a small pulse in a great living machine. The first man I spoke to was carrying baskets of limestone chips. His shoulders were broad and burned red, his linen kilt stiff with dust. He told me his name was Menka, from a small village far to the south. "I come when the river floods," he said. "The fields are gone, so we build instead. It's better than waiting for the water to fall." His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly when he rested them on the basket's edge. Nearby, a group of women ground grain with heavy stones, their laughter cutting through the noise. They worked for the bakers who fed the laborers, round loaves, sweet with honey when the priests were generous. Children ran between the huts, their bare feet leaving tiny marks in the sand. They carried water jars and shouted to each other in the high, clear voices of those not yet worn down by the sun. I followed the sound of chanting and found a team of men hauling a massive block up a ramp. A foreman stood above them, shouting rhythm in a deep, steady tone, not cruel but commanding. The workers pulled together, their bodies swaying in unison, sweat glistening like oil on their backs. For every 10 steps, they stopped, poured water on the sand to make it slick, and heaved again. It was like watching the heartbeat of the earth itself. One of the older men caught sight of me. His beard was white, his eyes sharp as obsidian. "You watch," he said, "but you do not see." He handed me a piece of the stone, smooth and cool. "This is the king's eternity. Every man here gives a piece of his own life to build it." He looked back toward the pyramid. "When it is done, they will say it was made by gods. But I tell you, gods don't bleed." Later, I visited the healer's tent. The smell of herbs and oil filled the air. Inside, a young woman with bandaged hands sat quietly as a healer ground poppy into paste. "Crushed fingers," the healer muttered, without looking up. "Too many ropes, too many stones." He dipped a cloth into water and pressed it to her palm. "Tomorrow she will return to work." There were songs too, rough and simple tunes that drifted through the camp. Some were work songs, others were prayers disguised as jokes. A boy sang about a crocodile who swallowed an overseer and was too sick to move for days. The laughter that followed was bright but nervous, Everyone glanced over their shoulders. When noon came, a bell sounded, a hollow ring that echoed off the stones. Work paused. The men sat in groups, drinking beer thick as porridge, chewing onions and bread. Some slept where they sat, others stared in silence toward the horizon. From where I stood, the desert shimmered like a golden sea, and the pyramid loomed above, casting its shadow over everything. As I watched, a strange thought struck me. The workers were building a monument not just to their pharaoh, but to themselves, though they did not know it. Their sweat, their pain, their laughter, all pressed into the seams of the stone, hidden between layers that would never see light again. When I turned to leave, I looked once more at the slope of the pyramid, already gleaming in the sun. The men looked so small against it, like ants building a mountain. Yet perhaps that was the secret of Egypt's greatness. It was not made by the mighty, but by countless small hands, working in rhythm, believing that their labor would please both king and gods. As I walked home, the sound of the chant still echoed in my head, a deep, endless pulse that seemed to merge with the heartbeat of the desert itself. That night, the village seemed to hold its breath. Lanterns glowed faintly in the dusty alleys, the air thick with the smell of cooking fires and wet sand from the river. The pyramid rose dark and silent in the distance, casting a shadow that touched the village edges, as if even the homes were afraid to disturb it. I walked toward the workers' camp, curious to see what they did after the day's labor. Most were quiet, sitting in small clusters, polishing tools, sharing meager meals, or simply staring at the sand stretching toward the horizon. But some whispered in corners, performing small rituals that had no names, at least none I knew. Near the edge of the camp, a man crouched over a pile of stones. He traced symbols with his finger, spirals and lines, eyes and birds, much like the ones I had seen in Nefer's papyrus, but rougher, more urgent. When I asked him, he shook his head. "It keeps the spirits away," he muttered, "the ones that hide beneath the sand." Others carried charms, small amulets carved from bone or clay, tied with reeds to their belts. A woman stirred incense into a small clay bowl, whispering prayers to a god I did not know, asking for safe hands and steady eyes for the men who would lift the heavy blocks again tomorrow. One of the older workers, a man whose face was lined by the sun and sweat, motioned me closer. "You see the shadows?" he asked quietly, pointing to the sand dunes beyond the camp. "They move differently at night. Not wind. Not animal. The desert remembers the builders who came before us." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "When a man dies in the pyramid, the earth takes him first, then the wind, then the sand. But sometimes the spirit walks, whispering to those who listen." I shivered. He smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "Do you hear the hum beneath the stones?" I nodded, remembering the vibration in the black chamber, the pulse that traveled through my chest when Nefer had placed his hand on the stone. "The pyramid listens," he said, "and it will remember you too." Some of the younger workers told stories to distract themselves from the cold night. A boy recounted seeing a snake with golden eyes near the quarry, claiming it was a messenger from the gods. Another whispered about a ghostly man who wandered the unfinished ramps, carrying a lantern that shone brighter than fire. The older men laughed quietly, but no one challenged the tales. They were careful not to speak too loudly, as if the desert itself might hear. I stayed until the moon had climbed high. The workers began to retreat into their huts, extinguishing small fires, leaving the sand to stretch unbroken between tents and tools. I wandered among the empty sledges, the smooth stones, the discarded bits of rope and cloth, imagining the rhythm of the day, the heaving, the sweat, the songs rising to meet the sun. And then I saw something I will never forget. A small group of men gathered silently near the base of the pyramid. They were not working, not eating, not speaking. Instead, they knelt in a circle, drawing something in the sand with their fingers. I could not see clearly in the moonlight, but the pattern was intricate: spirals, intersecting lines, and a single eye in the center. The air around them seemed to shimmer, though no wind blew. And from deep below, I felt a faint vibration, like the echo of stone breathing. I asked one of the men what they were doing. He looked at me with tired eyes. "It is for the dead," he said. "For those who built before us, and those who will come after. We mark the ground so the spirits know we remember, so they do not forget." I knelt beside them, watching as they finished their ritual. The sand swallowed the shapes quickly, smoothing over the marks as if nothing had been drawn. And yet I knew they were not gone. The memory remained, in the vibration beneath my feet, in the hum of the air, in the faint sigh that drifted up from the desert. When I finally returned to my village hut, the first hint of dawn was coloring the sky. The workers were already stirring, preparing for another day under the sun's relentless glare. But the memory of that night lingered with me, the whispers, the amulets, the sand designs, the secret life of those who build eternity one stone at a time. And as I lay on my mat, watching the village wake beneath the shadow of the pyramid, I realized something. The monument above us was not only a tomb. It was a vessel for memory, for belief, for the hidden rituals that connected the living and the dead. Every chant, every charm, every mark in the sand added to its power, silent threads woven into stone. The pyramid slept again, yes, but the people, the nameless, tireless hands, kept it alive. And I knew that their secrets, like the river and the wind, would travel through the night long after the day claimed the village. The next evening, the village lay quiet under the bruised purple sky of twilight. Keperu found Panifer seated at the edge of the river, his robes trailing in the sand. The old priest's eyes, gleaming faintly in the dim light, seemed to hold the reflection of every star above. He gestured for Keperu to sit beside him, his voice low and careful, as though afraid the night might overhear. "Do you remember the hum?" Panifer asked, almost a whisper. "Yes," Keperu said. "I hear it sometimes beneath the stones, beneath the pyramid." The priest nodded slowly. "Some sounds are not meant for the ears of men. They are not warnings. They are reminders. Reminders of what came before, and sometimes of what will come again." He reached into the folds of his robe and produced a small scroll, yellowed with age. "I will not show this to anyone else," he said, breaking the seal. The symbols inside were unlike anything Keperu had seen, not the neat hieroglyphs of Nefer, but jagged interlocking lines, spirals, and eyes carved to almost move as the lamplight danced. "These markings speak of the foundation of the pyramid," Panifer continued. "The stones rest not only on earth, but upon layers older than the first pharaohs. There are chambers beneath the base that were never meant to be entered. Some call them tombs, but they are not. They are wells of memory, traps for the souls that linger too long. And sometimes they awaken." Keperu's heart beat faster. "What awakens?" he asked. "The echoes," Panifer said. "The voices of those who built before us, who died before the kings. They do not move like the living, but they shift. They hum. And if a man touches the wrong stone, speaks the wrong word, or treads where he should not, he may find himself remembered forever, in a way he cannot escape." He paused, scanning the horizon. The pyramid loomed darkly, its face catching the last light of the sun. "You have been too close already," Panifer said, his voice dropping lower. "The black stone you touched, it is alive in memory. It sings with what once was. And sometimes, it calls the living into its song." Keperu swallowed hard. I didn't mean to." Panifer placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. "Intent matters little in these matters. Curiosity is the blood of life, but it can also be the chain that binds a man beneath the sand." He leaned closer, the candlelight catching the edges of his thin face. "There is a chamber," he whispered, "at the heart of the pyramid. It lies beneath the lowest foundation, below the stone you saw with Nefer. Some say the builders placed a gift there for the pharaoh, a gift of knowledge. Others say it is a trap, a seal for forces older than the river, older than the desert. No priest dares enter, no scribe dares draw its signs. Only those who are called by the hum, as you were, may find themselves wandering too close." Keperu's mind swirled with everything he had seen: the black stone, the symbols in Nefer's papyrus, the hum beneath the earth, the rituals of the workers, and now this warning. "Why me?" he asked quietly. Panefer's eyes softened. "Perhaps because you are both builder and listener. Perhaps because you have already felt the pulse of the desert. Or perhaps because the pyramid itself has chosen to remember you." The wind stirred, carrying a faint hum from the pyramid's direction, low, vibrating through the sand, through the night, through Keperu's chest. The old priest's hand pressed harder against his shoulder. "Do not be afraid of what sleeps," Panefer said. "But do not forget that some memories are too heavy to carry. Some stones are not meant to be lifted by human hands. And some doors, once opened, do not close." Keperu looked toward the dark silhouette of the pyramid. Its shadow stretched far across the desert, reaching even toward the river. He felt a cold thrill in his chest. The stories, the hum, the rituals, the secret chambers, it all seemed to pulse together. The pyramid was no longer simply stone. It was a living memory, a sentinel, and a warning. Panefer rose, resting on his staff. Tomorrow, the workers will continue their labor. The river will continue to flow. But tonight, listen. Listen and remember. Do not touch the stones that hum. Do not follow the shadows that twist beneath the sand. And if you feel the call again, remember my words." Keperu sat alone long after Panefer departed, the hum drifting faintly from the pyramid, growing softer as the moon rose high. He could hear the distant lapping of the Nile, the whisper of reeds, and somewhere beneath, the faint heartbeat of stone and memory. Sleep came only briefly, and when he woke, the pyramid stood the same, but somehow more immense, more aware. The desert had shifted slightly, as though responding to the priest's warning. And Keperu understood something fundamental. Curiosity could illuminate, but it could also unearth what the living were never meant to see. The morning was still, with a thin mist rising from the Nile, curling over the reeds like smoke from an invisible fire. Keperu walked along the riverbank, his sandals leaving shallow imprints in the damp sand. The village behind him slept or stirred quietly, unaware of the small pulse of adventure that called him now. He did not speak, for speech seemed too loud for the delicate quiet of the river. Water lapped gently against the banks, carrying with it scents of mud, fish, and the faint sweetness of river flowers. Keperu knelt and ran his fingers through the current. The hum beneath the pyramid was gone for now, yet he felt it in the ripple of the water, a faint echo, as though the river remembered what the stones could not. He followed the bend where the Nile curved sharply to the west, past groves of date palms and small fishing huts. The river widened here, forming shallow pools and channels where fish darted and dragonflies skimmed the surface. Keperu paused, noticing a small piece of driftwood, carved with simple marks, not natural, not random. 3 parallel lines, a spiral at the end, and a singled inside the spiral. He crouched, tracing the marks with his finger. "They are signs," he murmured. "Someone wants to be remembered, or is guiding me." The thought thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. These markings were too deliberate to be natural debris, too precise to be coincidence. He continued along the river, scanning the banks carefully. Every so often he found more, small stones stacked in unusual formations, reeds tied in patterns, tiny pieces of clay with spiral impressions. Each one seemed to point upriver, toward the distant base of the pyramid, as if the river itself were whispering a path he was meant to follow. By midday, the sun climbed high, burning gold across the water and sand. Keperu paused beneath a grove of palms, resting in their shade. From somewhere upstream, a fisherman called, and a boat glided past, oars dipping silently in the current. Keperu felt a shiver. Even in the daylight, the river seemed alive, watching, listening, remembering. He noticed something floating near the bank, a clay jar, sealed with pitch, partially buried in mud. Kneeling, he lifted it carefully. The jar was heavy for its size. Inside, he found a small bundle of reeds wrapped in linen. Unfurling it, he discovered papyrus marked with symbols. They were familiar, spirals, eyes, lines, like the black stone, like Nefer's papyrus, but simpler, almost like a child's notation. A message, left by someone who knew the river and the pyramid intimately. Keperu traced the signs with his finger. They told of a small channel beneath the Nile's edge, a hidden passage where sand had shifted to form a natural tunnel. It led, the papyrus indicated, toward the pyramid's base, near the corner that caught the morning sun. The note was clear in intention. This path was to be followed only by those who could hear the hum, those who were already listening. His heart pounded. The river had given him a gift, a guide, a whisper, a small thread leading deeper into the mystery. But with the gift came fear. The pyramid remembered him, the black stone remembered him, the hum had called him once. Would the river's path lead him closer, or into danger he could not return from? He spent hours following the riverbank, careful to avoid the eyes of the villagers and workers. Every twist of the water seemed to offer both concealment and warning. Dragonflies flitted across his path, shadows rippled under the surface, and the distant pyramids glinted in the sun as if observing his progress. By the time the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Keperu had reached the bend indicated in the papyrus. The channel ran shallow and narrow, hidden among reeds and mud, almost invisible from above. He knelt beside it, testing the soil, feeling the vibration of the sand beneath his hands. There was a faint pulse, just enough for him to feel alive and aware, the echo of the hum faintly traveling through the water into his chest. Kneeling there, he realized something. The river was more than a guide. It was alive with memory, carrying voices of builders, priests, and perhaps even the long silent ones who had laid the earliest stones beneath the earth. It hummed in rhythm with the pyramid, with the black stone, with the desert itself. Every ripple, every drift of sand, every hidden channel was part of its song. Keperu glanced back toward the village, then up at the sunlit pyramid. He felt the weight of what he was about to do, and yet he could not stop. The river had given him a thread, and he would follow it, step by step, even if it led him into the heart of memory itself. He gathered his courage, standing above the channel. Tomorrow, he would enter the hidden path. Tomorrow, he would follow the river's gift to where few dared to tread. And as the last light of day fell across the water, he heard it again, faint, soft, almost imperceptible. A vibration beneath the earth, beneath the sand, beneath the river itself. And for the first time, Keperu felt certain that the hum had chosen him, and that he could not turn back. Keperu waited until the sun had slipped behind the western dunes, leaving the desert in a soft violet twilight. He returned to the narrow channel, hidden among reeds and mud along the riverbank. The papyrus from the river lay tucked safely in his sash, a fragile map of symbols pointing the way. With one last glance toward the village, he knelt and tested the channel's edge. The water was shallow but cold, a surprising chill seeping into his fingers and feet. He waded in, moving carefully, aware that each step stirred sediment, each ripple echoed faintly in the quiet night. The reeds whispered against him as he passed, brushing his arms and legs like thin fingers, guiding him forward. Above, the stars glimmered, but here, below their sight, a different world awaited. The channel narrowed until he had to stoop, pressing his hands against the muddy banks. The papyrus indicated a bend, where the mud and sand formed a natural tunnel, almost invisible. He forced himself to follow it, crawling low, the water brushing his chest, the mud clinging to his knees. Each inch he advanced felt heavier, yet more purposeful. Then the tunnel opened slightly, revealing a shallow cavern. The walls were smooth, blackened with mineral streaks that caught what little light came from above, reflecting faint, ghostly patterns. Keperu paused, listening. No wind. No animals. Only the faint pulse beneath the ground, soft and steady, vibrating through the stone beneath his hands and knees. The cavern seemed to breathe, as if it had its own rhythm, separate from the river and the world above. Keperu moved forward, noticing the symbols etched faintly into the walls, spirals, eyes, intersecting lines, all faintly glowing as if alive. He traced one with his fingertip. A faint hum traveled through his arm, up into his chest, a gentle reminder of the black stone below the pyramid. It was familiar and unsettling. Ahead, the tunnel curved sharply. The channel of water narrowed into a trickle, then disappeared completely into the sand-strewn floor. Kneeling, Keperu pressed onward, feeling the mud and stones give beneath him. He emerged into a small chamber, low-ceilinged, carved meticulously from the natural rock. It was empty. Almost. The walls shimmered faintly, reflecting his torchlight. Beneath a thin layer of dust, he noticed faint handprints, small, delicate, worn smooth by time. The echoes of those who had been here before him lingered in the air, carried in the vibration of stone and mud. A distant, hollow drip of water marked the only sound. He walked deeper, tracing the carvings along the walls. Some symbols he recognized from Nefer's teachings, others were older, undecipherable, almost organic in shape. It felt as if the stone itself remembered a language forgotten by men, a memory older than the river, older than the desert. Then he saw it, a shallow depression in the floor, filled with smooth black pebbles. They formed a spiral pattern, tiny stones aligned with precision that no human hand could match without obsession or ritual. He knelt beside it, placing his hand over the center of the spiral. Immediately, the familiar hum rose again, faint at first, then stronger, vibrating through the floor and walls. The channel beneath the river had connected to something vast, something sleeping, waiting. Kneeling there, he felt a presence, not malevolent, but watchful. The air thickened, the light seemed to bend around the walls. He could almost see shadows moving beneath the stone, echoes of builders, priests, and perhaps those who had walked these passages long before pyramids were built. A memory not his own pressed against him, and for a heartbeat, he wondered if he should turn back. But curiosity pressed harder than fear. He examined the spiral more closely. Each stone seemed to pulse subtly, as though keeping time with a rhythm too slow and too vast for the human ear. He realized it was a map of memory, a way to follow the past, layer by layer, step by step, down toward the core of the pyramid's foundation. Keperu rose slowly, his torch casting long shadows on the walls. He glanced back at the tunnel he had crawled through, then forward, toward the deeper passage indicated by the black spiral. He could not see its end, but he felt it calling, a whisper beneath the hum, guiding him toward a hidden chamber beneath the stones, where the pyramid's memory slept deepest. And so he stepped forward, water seeping into his sandals, mud clinging to his knees, torchlight trembling. The river's gift had led him here. The hidden channel beneath the pyramid awaited, and with it, the pulse of the desert, the stone, and the forgotten builders of eternity. Beneath the sand, beneath the stones, beneath the river itself, something ancient watched. And Keperu had walked straight into its memory. Keperu's sandals slipped slightly on the wet, muddy floor as he followed the narrow channel deeper into the pyramid's foundation. Each step echoed faintly, though the sound seemed swallowed almost immediately by the immense stone pressing down above him. The water trickled in shallow streams along the walls, carrying with it the scent of earth and minerals, and beneath it all a hum faint vibrating through the soles of his feet, through his bones. Finally, the channel opened into a chamber. The air here was heavier, warmer, almost palpable. Shadows stretched along the walls, shifting as his torchlight flickered. But it was not the darkness that caught him, it was the whispers. Soft, low, unintelligible at first, but insistent. Voices layered upon one another, a chorus of echoes, almost musical, almost alive. He stepped cautiously forward, torch held high, revealing walls carved with delicate spirals, eyes and intersecting lines, symbols older than Nefer's papyrus, older than the village itself. Some seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the hum beneath his feet. The chamber smelled faintly of resin and dust, the air carrying centuries of human breath, sweat, and whispered prayers. Kneeling to examine the floor, he saw faint imprints, handprints, footprints, tools, small objects left by unseen builders. The black pebbles from the spiral outside were repeated here, arranged in concentric patterns, pointing toward a low recess at the far end of the chamber. Kneeling there, Keperu noticed something extraordinary. The recess was filled with small fragments of limestone, each marked with a single eye or spiral. He could not tell if they were carved by hand or shaped by some deeper memory embedded in the stone itself. As he reached forward, the whispers grew louder, a gentle crescendo, layered and indistinct, but unmistakably intelligent. It was as if the builders themselves had left a record, not in ink or stone, but in vibration and memory. He placed a hand on the cool stone floor and felt it thrum beneath his palm, a slow heartbeat. It was alive with remembrance, with labor, with faith, and something older, something beyond comprehension. He looked up and noticed faint carvings along the ceiling, geometric shapes and lines that seemed impossible, yet precise. Some twisted in spirals that defied logic, as if the very stone remembered patterns beyond human sight. A shiver ran down his spine, part fear, part awe. This chamber was not meant for ordinary eyes. It existed as a memory, a recording of every hand that had touched the stones above, every chant, every whispered prayer, every drop of sweat. Kneeling again, Keperu whispered softly, as if addressing invisible builders. "Who are you? What have you left behind?" The hum beneath his palm responded, faintly at first, then rising in a subtle harmony. The whispers seemed to form words, or maybe impressions, too quick, too subtle for language, but he understood them nonetheless. They spoke of labor and devotion, of hunger and exhaustion, of faith and fear. They spoke of builders who had vanished into history, leaving nothing but stone and memory. Then he noticed a small indentation in the far wall, just above the floor. It was shaped like a shallow basin, lined with black pebbles similar to those outside. As he leaned closer, the hum seemed to converge beneath it, vibrating through his body. When he touched the basin, a vision flickered in his mind, a glimpse of workers sliding massive stones up ramps, singing songs to keep rhythm, their faces bright with determination, their hands blistered and raw, the desert stretching endlessly around them. The vision shifted. He saw priests overseeing rituals, marking symbols in the sand. He saw Nefer, the black stone, the hidden spirals in the riverbank. And beneath it all, he felt something vast and ancient, the pulse of memory itself, as though the chamber were a heart, and he had placed his hand upon it. Kneeling in awe, Keperu realized the truth. The pyramid was not just a tomb, nor simply a monument. It was a living archive, a vessel of remembrance, shaped not only by kings and priests, but by every hand, every breath, every prayer, and every heartbeat that had passed beneath its shadow. The whispers softened, the hum settling into a steady, calm pulse. And for the first time, Keperu understood that he was not intruding. He was part of it now, a witness, a listener, a bearer of memory. And somewhere deep beneath the stones, beneath the river and the desert, the builder's echoes continued, patient, eternal, waiting for those who would hear. Kneeling in the chamber of echoes, Keperu felt the pulse of the hum under his hands, steady now, like the slow breathing of a giant. He let his eyes roam over the carved walls, tracing the spirals, the eyes, the strange intersecting lines, feeling their rhythm as if they were alive. And then he noticed a faint glimmer near the recess at the far end, a reflection that did not belong to his torchlight. He rose slowly, moving toward it with careful steps, aware that the slightest sound might disturb the whispers that filled the chamber. The glimmer came from a small depression in the floor, just beneath a carved eye on the wall. It was subtle, almost hidden beneath a layer of dust and sand, but unmistakable. A small object had been left deliberately, placed here long ago. Kneeling, Keperu cleared the sand carefully, revealing a vessel made of black stone, smooth, oval, and cold to the touch. It was unlike any jar or container he had seen. It felt alive, resonating faintly under his palm, as though it had absorbed the hum from a chamber itself. He turned it gently, noticing tiny spiral symbols etched along its surface. They were familiar, echoing the markings on the black stone, on Nefer's papyrus, and in the hidden river channel. He opened the vessel slowly. Inside lay a small collection of objects, each arranged with deliberate care. A single black pebble, polished smooth, almost glowing faintly in the torchlight. A fragment of papyrus, yellowed and brittle, with symbols that seemed to shimmer as he moved them. Tiny clay figurines, each depicting a laborer, a priest, and a small child, carved in intricate detail. Kneeling there, Keperu felt the hum intensify beneath his hands, vibrating through the chamber and into his chest. It was as if the vessel itself were alive, as if the builders had left a heartbeat encoded in stone and clay. He unfurled the papyrus carefully. The symbols seemed to form a story, not in words, but in sequence. Hands lifting stone, chants rising into the air, water flowing along a channel, shadows moving beneath the earth. He traced the lines with his finger, feeling the rhythm, a memory, encoded in symbols, waiting to be read. The figurines, he realized, were not merely decorative. They represented the builders themselves, their positions, their roles, their daily toil. Each one corresponded to a spiral on the vessel and to a point in the chamber. It was a map, a memory, and a record, all in one. And at the center, the black pebble pulsed faintly, the core of the offering, the heart of the memory. Kneeling over the vessel, Keperu understood something profound. The builders had created not only a monument above the sand, but a record beneath it, a living memory, encoded in stone, clay, and symbols. The black stone he had touched outside, the hum beneath the pyramid, the river channel, all were connected. The vessel was a gift, a way to ensure that their labor, their devotion, and their memory would persist, even if the world above forgot them. He closed the vessel gently, careful to leave everything as he had found it. The whispers softened, as if acknowledging his understanding. And in the pulse beneath the chamber, he felt a quiet approval, a recognition from the builders themselves. As he rose to leave, Keperu looked around the chamber one last time. The shadows seemed deeper, yet warmer, almost protective. He realized that the pyramid was more than a tomb, more than a monument. It was a vessel of memory, of labor, of life and devotion preserved beneath the desert and the stones. He returned to the channel leading back to the river, carrying the knowledge of the hidden offering in his heart. The hum beneath the pyramid followed him, faint but steady, a companion on his journey back to the world above. And as he emerged into the cool night air, Keperu understood. The pyramid had chosen him, not to lift its stones, but to witness, to remember, and perhaps one day to tell its story. Keperu returned to the village just as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand-strewn streets. The workers had already begun their evening routines. Some mended nets and tools, others tended small fires, cooking the meager meals of lentils and bread. Yet tonight, There was a tension in the air that he could feel in every step. The overseers moved among the huts, their presence sharp and deliberate. Not violent, not loud, but precise, a quiet authority that pressed down on every laborer's shoulders. They inspected baskets, checked the alignment of stone blocks, and whispered orders in low tones. Every worker watched their movements closely, aware that a misstep, a missed measurement, or a slight delay could bring punishment. Keperu noticed a young man struggling with a basket of food, sweat dripping from his forehead. An overseer stepped beside him, silently correcting the way he held it, then moved on without a word. The man straightened immediately, as if mere observation had been enough to remind him of his place. And yet, beneath the surface, Keperu saw the flicker of resentment, a tiny spark of defiance hidden in tired eyes. He walked toward the center of the village, where a small square served as a gathering place for meals and announcements. A few workers had gathered in a loose circle, whispering among themselves. Keperu approached cautiously, listening. "They've been stricter these past weeks," one man murmured. "They say the pharaoh commands that more blocks be cut, more sand moved, and that no mistake will be forgiven. They even check the tools for wear. If they find a chip, they say the worker is careless and must make amends." A woman added, her voice barely above a whisper, "I heard the overseer punished 2 men today. They were not slow, not careless, but he said the pyramid itself demanded obedience." Keperu felt a chill. He understood that the overseers were more than just enforcers. They were instruments of fear and belief, keeping the rhythm of labor in perfect alignment with the pyramid above. And yet, even in fear, he noticed small acts of quiet resistance. A basket placed slightly differently, a whispered joke, a hand reaching out to help another secretly. From the corner of his eye, Keperu saw Panifer watching the village from the edge of the square. The old priest's face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, noting every detail. The workers' whispers, the overseer's steps, the subtle tensions that rippled through the camp. Keperu approached him quietly. "They are afraid," Panifer said softly, as if reading Keperu's thoughts. "Yes," Keperu replied. "But I see their courage too. Small, hidden, but there." The priest nodded. "Fear is a tool. It shapes hands, bends backs, keeps men moving when the sun is relentless. But courage, even a whisper of it, shapes hearts. And hearts are stronger than stone in the long run." As they spoke, one overseer passed nearby, a tall man with a shadowed face and eyes that seemed to pierce everything. Keperu felt the weight of the gaze, but he noticed the subtle tension in the overseer's step. A slight hesitation when a young worker stepped out of line, a small twitch of doubt. Even authority had its cracks. Later, Keperu wandered among the huts. He saw the hidden gestures of solidarity, a loaf of bread shared quietly, a hand resting on a blistered shoulder, a whispered song to keep spirits lifted while the overseers were away. He realized that these small moments, invisible to the powerful, were the true pulse of the village, the living memory, like the chamber beneath the pyramid, preserving humanity beneath pressure and fear. As night fell, lanterns were lit. The overseers withdrew to their tents, leaving the workers to their whispered stories and hidden rituals. Keperu sat outside his hut, listening to the distant hum of the pyramid, the faint whisper of the river, and the quiet chatter of the villagers. He felt the threads of tension, courage, and memory weaving together, an invisible pattern that connected the living to the stones, to the river, and to the builders who had long since vanished beneath the desert. The shadow of the overseer was heavy, yes, but it was only part of the story. Beneath it, unseen yet alive, flowed the resilience of those who labored, loved, and whispered in the sand. And Keperu understood that to witness this, to see both fear and courage intertwined, was to hold a secret as vital as the hum beneath the pyramid itself. He stayed long into the night, tracing the rhythm of life in the village, aware that the pyramid above did not only watch him, it watched them all. And in that shadow, He realized that even small acts of defiance and quiet memory had the power to endure far longer than fear. The day dawned with an unusual brightness, the sun spilling gold across the village and river alike. Keperu stepped out of his hut and immediately noticed the air was different, lighter, charged with anticipation. The villagers were bustling with preparation. Baskets of dates and figs were arranged neatly. Clay jars of beer and water lined the tables. Reeds and palm fronds were braided into decorations. Today was the festival of the Nile, a day when work slowed, songs rose higher, and the river itself seemed to take center stage. Children ran along the banks, tossing small clay boats into the water, watching as they drifted downstream. Women wove garlands of flowers, their hands moving deftly despite the heat. Men polished their tools and cleaned their sandals, preparing to participate in rituals that had been passed down for generations, sometimes in secret, sometimes in plain sight. Keperu wandered toward the river, noticing the subtle connection between the festivities and the pyramid looming in the distance. The workers paused their songs to dip their hands in the water, murmuring blessings to the river as if it could carry their labor, their lives, and their prayers to the pharaoh himself. Panifer appeared, standing near the center of the celebration, his eyes sweeping over the gathering, noting small gestures, hidden rites, and whispers that passed unnoticed by others. Keperu joined a group of men who were arranging reeds into spirals along the riverbank. As he worked, he noticed how the patterns mirrored the carvings in the pyramid's hidden chambers, spirals, intersecting lines, and eyes pointing in deliberate directions. Even in celebration, the memory of the builders, the laborers, and the stones below seemed to echo in the rituals of the living. A woman approached, carrying a small clay jar filled with water. She whispered a blessing to Keperu before pouring a few drops into the river. "It is for those who labored beneath the sun," she said softly, "and for those who will follow the hum, even when we are gone." Songs began to rise along the river. They were simple, repeating phrases, work songs transformed into praise, prayers disguised as playful chants. The sound carried over the water, bouncing against the reeds and the distant pyramid, intertwining with the hum Keperu still felt faintly beneath the sand. It was as if the river itself was singing, a living thread connecting past, present, and future. At the center of the festival, the overseers stood apart, watching carefully. Their authority was still present, a quiet pressure, but today it seemed muted, softened by the rhythm of celebration. The workers moved in small, deliberate circles, sharing bread and beer, exchanging stories of labor, and passing small charms for protection and blessing. Keperu noticed one small act that struck him deeply. A young man placed a tiny black pebble, polished and smooth, into the river, murmuring a silent prayer. It was the same as the one in the hidden offering beneath the pyramid, and for a moment, Keperu understood. These rituals, small and invisible to outsiders, were ways the living honored the memory of builders long gone. The river carried their prayers, the hum beneath the stones acknowledged their presence, and the pyramid itself seemed to pulse in recognition. As the day wore on, Keperu wandered along the edge of the festival, observing quietly. He noticed hidden patterns, gestures that were repeated in secret, whispers shared among friends, subtle signs that reinforced memory and tradition. Even in joy, there was reverence, and even in celebration, there was recognition of labor, devotion, and the unseen forces that shaped their lives. The sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows from the pyramid across the festival. Lanterns were lit, flickering along the riverbank, reflecting on the water like scattered stars. Keperu felt the hum beneath the sand rise faintly once more, almost in time with the music and laughter, the prayers and offerings. It was as if the pyramid itself joined in the celebration, acknowledging both the living and the memory preserved beneath its stones. As night fell, Keperu understood something profound. The festival was more than tradition. It was a living connection to the builders of the past, to the hum beneath the pyramid, and to the river that carried their collective memory. The stones, the water, the air, the songs, all intertwined into a rhythm that transcended time. And for the first time, he felt that he truly belonged, not as a laborer, not as a visitor, but as a witness to the living memory of those who had come before. After the festival of the Nile ended, the village settled into quiet night, the hum of celebration replaced by soft whispers and the distant lapping of the river. Keperu lingered near the riverbank, watching the water shimmer under the moonlight. Even though the villagers had returned to their huts and fires had dimmed to embers, he felt a subtle shift in the rhythm of the world around him, a disturbance in the pulse beneath the sand, beneath the stones, beneath the river itself. He knelt beside the water, running his fingers through the cool current, and immediately noticed a faint vibration different from the familiar hum he had come to recognize. It was slower, deeper, almost hesitant, as if the river itself were warning him, trying to communicate something urgent. Kneeling there, he closed his eyes and listened, letting the subtle vibrations travel through his hands and feet, up into his chest. The reeds along the river whispered more urgently in the night breeze, and the faint reflection of the pyramid seemed to shimmer unnaturally, almost as if it breathed in rhythm with a hidden pulse. Keperu's mind traced back to Panifer's warning about the black stone and the chambers beneath the pyramid. Every piece of memory, every ripple, every hum, he now realized, was connected. And the message was clear: something had shifted. He traced the river upstream cautiously, moving silently along the banks. The water here was colder, the current slightly faster, carrying faint traces of silt from the desert floor. As he walked, he noticed small anomalies: stones arranged differently than usual, reeds bent in unnatural angles, and subtle depressions in the sand where something had passed unseen. It was as if the river had become a messenger, marking the path for him to follow, warning him of what stirred beneath the surface. Eventually, he reached the narrow channel where the hidden passage began, the same one that had guided him to the Chamber of Echoes. The water in the channel rippled faintly, carrying the same strange vibration he had felt in the river, stronger here, almost palpable. Kneeling at the entrance, he placed a hand on the mud and stone. The hum beneath the pyramid responded immediately, pulsing erratically, almost like a heartbeat racing in alarm. Kneeling, he listened and realized that the vibrations carried a pattern, a sequence of tones, shifting in frequency, layered like voices overlapping in warning. He could not yet decipher it, but instinctively, he understood its meaning. Something moved in the hidden layers beneath the pyramid, something unseen, something old and restless. The channel seemed narrower tonight, almost constricting. Kneeling to peer into the darkness, he saw shadows moving against the walls, faint and indistinct, like shapes remembered by the stone itself. A low, almost musical murmur rose from deep below, blending with the river's whisper, forming a subtle but insistent warning. It was not hostile but insistent, an admonition to proceed carefully, to honor the memory of what slept beneath the foundation. Keperu's heart pounded. He thought of the hidden offering, the black stone, and the Chamber of Echoes. Everything was connected: the hum, the river, the pyramid, the laborers, the unseen hands of builders long dead. And now the river itself had spoken, cautioning him that the balance of memory and stone was delicate, fragile, and easily disturbed. He knelt in silence for a long while, feeling the pulse beneath his palms, listening to the overlapping whispers of river, stone, and sand. The vibration became steadier, almost like a warning sigh, a reminder that curiosity and observation carried responsibility. He felt a shiver, not from fear alone, but from the immense weight of what the pyramid contained, and the unseen forces that responded to those who dared approach too closely. Finally he rose, the torchlight casting long shadows along the water and reeds. The river had spoken, and its message was clear. The pyramid's memory was waking in subtle, unpredictable ways, and the path he had begun to follow was not without peril. He would need vigilance, patience, and respect for forces older than men, older than the desert, older than the river itself. As he made his way back toward the village, The hum beneath the pyramid settled into a steady pulse once more, though fainter, almost contemplative. The river continued to ripple quietly, carrying its warning downstream, unseen by those asleep in their huts. And Keperu understood. The night was alive, and the pyramid, the river, and the stones beneath were whispering together, reminding him that memory, curiosity, and caution were forever intertwined. He paused at the edge of the village, looking up at the pyramid silhouetted against the starlit sky. Even from here, he could feel the hum vibrating softly, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. And for the first time, he understood that the journey he had begun, following the hum, discovering the hidden chambers, observing the village and the river, was only the beginning. The pyramid had many secrets left to reveal, and the river had more warnings yet to carry.